Did it work? Did it work? I think it worked. Hopefully that worked. So now we are in the semi-secret live stream. I don't know if I successfully deleted. I didn't. Hold on. Now I've got to delete this live stream. I would like to edit the video. And by edit, I mean I would like to, I guess I'll just make it private. And that will solve the problem. That's as good as deleting. Okay, here's what I'm going to try to do. I just did a lovely Project for Awesome. One of the Project for Awesome perks was a chat, like a 5-minute chat where I learn about a little bit about what kind of books you like, and then I recommend some books to you. And the person I just talked to, Gemma, who's been a nerd fighter since 2008, was like, "What are you working on?" And I was like, "Well, I'm working on this very weird metafictional story." And she was like, "I really liked the junket live streams that you did." And I was like, "You know what? Maybe I'll just try to read some of this and see how it goes." So I'm going to read you some of this weird metafictional story I've been writing. It's very weird. I don't want to overplay its weirdness, but it's a little unusual for me. It's a little more personal than most of my stories, I guess you could say, but also plottier. So we're going to give it a try, and I will not be able to see your reactions while I'm talking, but I will be able to see them later. So I'll go back and look at them and get ideas and think about what you had to say and all that stuff. A couple of rules: please don't share this. That's why all the hullabaloo of going through to the secret live stream is to prevent any problems there, if that makes sense. And then another, I mean, it's a weird plot that's sort of like obviously plotty, self-consciously plotty. So just don't get your expectations up too high. So yeah, just don't share it, and bear in mind that I will read your comments. So you know, keep it constructive if you can. Unless you, I mean, it's also okay to hate it. All right, I think it's going to be called the trauma plot. Maybe. This first section is narrated. This first, well, whatever. I'm not gonna. Why would I give you any preview? Here we go. You wrote the best-selling American novel of 2013, but that was some time ago. Now you're sitting on the L thinking about the utter strangeness that you, a doughy man of limited talents, are both physically traceable to the person who wrote that novel and utterly strange to him. That man, all those years ago, wanted everything you have. And this man, this present you, wants for nothing except what that previous man had. Every tale is of yearning, as you once put it, back when you believed in such broadly declarative sentences. Now you are winding down toward the valley that lies on the other side of good fortune. You've lived the whole lottery plot, and now you're 34. Everything after will be a coda crammed into the last paragraph of the obituary. This is where I make a big decision, and I don't know if I should go all in on the metafictionality of it or just give the author a Kilgore Trout name, but whatever. This is his current name. Green spent his later years between Chicago and Indianapolis, where he lived comfortably and alone off his royalties. His last novel, written in the months before his death, stars a washed-up American soccer player named John Green fighting through his final injury-plagued season in the 5th tier of Swedish football. According to his agent, the novel has yet to find a publisher, or something like that. An old woman sits in the corner of the train. She wears black orthotic shoes and the thick hosiery of a generation past. She hunches forward as if embracing the groceries that are in a black two-wheeled cart before her. Her thin white hair has been recently blow-dried. She looks like she used to have money and can't forget the comfort it brought. No, that's too pat. What does she look like? She wears a black coat, fur at the neck, and a hand-knit scarf. She looks like she stayed at a beach house in the summers when she was younger, for a couple weeks each year. Nantucket, perhaps? Picture the room where she slept. A double bed, which she shared with her older sister. A completed jigsaw puzzle of Van Gogh's sunflowers glued together and hung on the wall. Sea urchin wallpaper. Now, imagine the worst day of her life. Her husband's death? No, too obvious. And anyway, why have her defined by her worst day, hemmed in by that memory? That's exactly what's wrong with your writing. You keep glancing at her, trying to turn her from an object into a person. No wedding ring, but she wears what looks like a class ring with an emerald in it. Her skin is gray and sags off her face. You imagine that she perhaps has lost weight. You think about how gravity does this, how it pulls us back toward the ground from which we came. But no, you're trying to avoid faux scientific imagery, trying to be a bit harder boiled, shorter sentences. So, okay, she wasn't always this thin. She wears a class ring. Is it her ring? You decide that it ought to be. Otherwise, it'd be the ring of a dead child or lover. And then we've got ourselves a mere trauma plot, which simply won't do. It's her class ring. She attended her 60th high school anniversary not long ago. She was astonished by how many people she recognized, how many 77-year-olds still looked plausibly like themselves. It could be a marriage plot. Maybe she met an old friend at the reunion and something sparked. But can she love like she used to? It's different when you know the costs. That might be something, if only you knew anything about being old, or for that matter, about being in love. Suddenly, in real life, the old woman looks up at you. The train is mostly empty. You realize why she's in a corner, her back against two separate walls. She's scared of you, the youngish man stealing glances at her. Sorry, you mumble. You wonder how to communicate to her that you are utterly you wonder how to communicate to her that you are utterly ineffectual and impotent. I'm a writer, you blurt out. And this woman on the train smiles. You are between stops, sunshine streaming in through the south-facing windows, rumbling past the apartments of Lincoln Square. She is still staring, still smiling, small gray teeth drifting apart from each other like siblings in adulthood. God, no. No more cheap fucking similes. I know who you are, Mr. Green, she says. That stops you short. The chief pleasure of having once been a famous author is that almost no one knows what you look like, because to them, you're mostly made out of text. Well, hello, you say. You stand up and walk over to her, reach out a hand. I'm John Green, you say. The train sways, and you nearly lunge into her lap, but manage to catch one of the chrome poles in the middle of the empty train car. You know Taxiarchus Messopoulos, she says. Axie, you say? He was a friend in college. Not quite a friend, actually. Yeah, of course I remember Taxi. Are you? Yes, I am his friend. I am his dearest friend. That's what he calls me. Dearest. Dearest. She says Taxi's name correctly, like taxi, whereas you always said it like taxi cab. Now, at last, she brings her hand toward yours, and as you shake, you feel the limp, dry hand within yours and glance down at the yellowing nail beds with deep vertical ridges. In that moment, you are surprised by a stigmatic prick in the center of your palm. You snatch your hand away, wondering if you were both bit by a jolt of static electricity. This is wintertime Chicago, after all. But inside of a second, your face warms, blushing. You're stoned, something opiatish spreading fast. A great calm branches through your chest, and you sit down on the sticky, filthy gray-black floor of the train car. You know this is a negative development in your life, but you've always enjoyed anesthesia. Now you lie back. Best to. You're going to sleep soon. Mind swimming, nothing to think about except that it feels good. Your face gets slapped. Hard, bright, but you don't mind much. Still, you open your eyes, squint them into focus. The old lady, who now does not seem so old, stares down at you. When you wake up, let Toxie know that Dearest needs to speak to him. You won't want to call anyone but Toxie. He'll know what to do. You sleep now. You sleep, you wake up and find Toxie. Tell him dearest needs him. Yes, dearest. Dearest. You fight to stay conscious, not so much because of Taxi or the old woman or fear, but because of the euphoric wave cresting over you. There will be another wave behind, if only you can stay awake for it. Feel yourself getting pulled under. You only ever think in words, not images. Even the things you see are made out of words. You can only think of how to write them, not of what they are. You've always seen this way. Language is all you've got. But here, as you drift down into the depths, there is finally something to see. White, ghoulish wisps slither into your nose. How can you see them with your eyes closed? You see them because you can see all of you, because you are distant from you, an observer at last, seeing yourself as others see you. Look at you, a man in sweatpants and a plaid button-down, a black puffy coat that has never been warm enough. You're sprawled out on the floor of a brown line train in the city you love. Over soon now. All the worry and ambition ends here. The race is run. You watch as the woman inserts an old flip phone into your coat pocket and then zips the pocket up. How can you be seeing this? Now the woman is walking away. The train is slowing. She timed this. You don't feel like yourself. The image is going grayscale, pointillist, but you can still see yourself. Almost. Look at you, jaw agape, muscles slack. You used to be so young. You see a baseball cap, the letters CTA circled in blue. A face resolves. Coming to is never like in the movies. It takes forever. Your first thought is you hope she hasn't checked your ID, hope this isn't a news story. But that's your grandiosity at work, of course. Washed up novelist passes out in public is never going to make the rounds on Twitter. There, the only comment would be, I thought he died? Cold air blowing in from open doors. The fast cycling fluorescent lights are hell on your damaged vestibular system. You sit up. Stay down, the conductor says. Just lay down and wait. No. You can feel dried drool on the side of your mouth. No, I'm good. Just fell asleep. You sit up and pull yourself to standing with the help of the pole. Long day at work, you say. You've told many lies, but none as egregious as this. You haven't had a long day at work in many years. You sure? The conductor asks. Big man fills out his uniform. Yeah. We're at Kimball? I ask. You ask? The conductor nods. Train doors are open. You leave, walk up the stairs, and wait for a cab at the corner of Foster and Lincoln. You think about how after a devastating breakup, when you tried to quit your magazine job, your boss, Ben Segedin, said, you don't need to leave Chicago. Just move neighborhoods. It'll be like a whole new city. And it was. Maybe your life will break down again and you'll end up here on the northwest edge of the city in a small apartment with narrow windows above a Napa auto parts store. You're trying to blink out the late afternoon sunshine. You lean into the wind. You tell yourself that you are alive. Feel that heart thumping its I-ams. Pull your cap down over your eyebrows and let your glasses do the rest of the work. You're cold, but you've been cold before. You know how to be cold. While waiting for a cab and then after one picks you up and heads for Lincoln Square, you catalog everything you know about Toxiarchus Metsopolis. Taxi, you never knew him by a different name, always described people elliptically. If you asked him if he was Greek, he'd say, Greek is my first language. Nice language, too. Sophocles, and you know. Of a skinny person, he would say, this person, they can really cinch a belt. He spoke perfect English with a vast vocabulary, but with an otherworldly accent, the flat vowels of America, but with the precise diction of a posh Londoner and a hint of polyglot European. Once you'd been drinking by a campfire and someone asked him why he talked that way, and he said, I was educated largely in bubbles. And when you ask again, he said, you know, American schools, but not the ones in America. Afterwards, friends, including you, often teased him about it. When Taxi didn't know this or that piece of pop culture, someone would say, to be fair, he was educated largely in bubbles. Like a lot of kids at Kenyon, he majored in English. Then he'd gone to grad school, and the last time you talked to him in the green room before an event in a theater in Indianapolis, he was teaching at a large state university. You asked him how it was, and he said, I like about 80% of my students and 40% of my colleagues. He had the sort of confidence that made an asymmetrical face handsome. He was quick-witted, funny, and almost always agreeable, which made this one moment in an Irish literature class all the more discordant. After the teacher described the west of Ireland, so mythologized by Yeats and Behan as remote, Taxi raised his hand and said, I do not have a perfect grasp of the language, but does not remote imply distance from a center? Doesn't remote mean remote from you or from Yeats or from some imagined axis mundi? We are remote from them, they are remote from us, but neither of us is remote in any kind of generalized way. The professor, an American woman named MacArthur, nodded, began to speak, stopped herself, and finally began again. Shall we say rural then, Taxi? Yes, Taxi said. Rural. By senior year, you were friends, but casually. You knew Taxi primarily due to your irregular love affair with his best friend, a red-headed pot enthusiast from New Hampshire who once wrote you a haiku on a scrap of paper that he then balled up and shoved deep into a pocket of the blue jeans you left next to his bed. You almost threw away the paper while doing laundry in the basement of your dorm room, but then discovered the poem, and your heart fell right through your stomach. No, that's no good. Must imagine more carefully, must try to find original language for the original experience rather than retrofitting the feeling to existing languages. When you unfolded that scrap of paper and read the haiku, you thought you might die from the joy of it. You thought nobody should ever be allowed to feel something like this. But this isn't about the redheaded poet. This is about Taxi. You remember Taxi the morning of graduation. You'd stayed up all night with him and his girlfriend Anya and maybe a dozen others, and you watched the sunrise from atop the little hill behind the college's dining hall. You knew that you would never see most of these people again. Taxi gave a drunken and lovely recitation of that Frank O'Hara poem about having a Coke with you, and his girlfriend veritably melted. You remember looking at Taxi and feeling like he wanted to kiss you at one point, but that seemed impossible on many levels. You were never much good at sex stuff, not least because you thought and spoke of it as sex stuff. As the redhead had once put it, John is living evidence that bisexual doesn't mean super sexual. But this isn't about sex stuff. This is about Taxi. What else from that night? You asked him what he would do, and he said, same thing I've been doing, labor under the thumb of those who control the means of production. And you'd thought that was funny. But that had all been many years ago. You're 34 now, an inexcusable age. You saw Taxi in Prague. Taxi in Prague. You saw Taxi in Prague once, maybe a year after a parent. You walked through the catacombs together. He was on a Fulbright or something, researching modernist Czech literature. You were with the tour guide who spoke first in Czech and then repeated himself. You were in the catacombs with him, with a tour guide who spoke first in Czech and then repeated himself in English. Taxi said, at the next left, stay toward the back, and then we'll step over a rope. You watched as he did so, and you followed him. Together, you walked into absolute darkness. The unofficial tour, he whispered as he turned on the flashlight of his phone. In the silver light, you could see stacks of femurs as high as your head. You walked further into the catacombs and the damp chill of being way underground, and felt the damp chill of being way underground and not knowing the way out. You told him you were freaked out, but he said he'd done this a million times. There was this one thing he really wanted to show you. So you wound your way through arced tunnels that gave way to room after room after room of human bones. 50,000 bodies down there, the tour guide had said, dating back to when the Black Death killed half of Prague in a single year, 1348. At last, you entered a room, and Taxi's flashlight settled on a hand-painted sign. The words looked Latin. Haec sunt ossa que expectant usa tua, he said. These are the bones that wait for your bones. Excellent, no? Carol is at your house. You pay her to be there. You wonder when somebody not in your employ last entered your home. You don't have Taxi's number, but you have the redheads. You go upstairs into the attic office. When you designed this room, you'd imagined all the books that you would write here. You've written none. You sit down on a $14,000 couch and you call the redhead. I think that's all I have time for. So I'm going to stop. Corey knows the story of the these are the bones that wait for your bones, which is a story my mom told me that I've been trying to put into a book for like 15 years. This will probably never be a book, but it is interesting and fun. And it's nice to work on something that feels different and plotty and proggy. Okay. All right. I will. I think I'm gonna leave this unlisted for now in case you know people like people in Nerdfighteria who are on the Discords or Reddits or whatever and want to hear it, but don't want to. But yeah, don't share. Please don't share it widely. Please only share it in like those like semi-private spaces, if that makes sense. Y'all know better than I do how to navigate the internet in 2022. So, yeah. All right. Thanks. Thanks for listening. I look forward to reading all of your comments. Yeah, I'm enjoying writing it. It's been really fun and really yeah, just really fun. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm it feels nice to experiment, I guess. Like it feels nice to write in a way that I've never written before. And yeah, I hope you liked it. And if you didn't like it, that's okay. You should let me know that as well. Yeah. All right. Thank you. And DFTBA.